I think, again, here are some very clear basics. Netanyahu does not want a ceasefire. Netanyahu does not want a political solution with Palestine. Netanyahu wants, for his own ideological purposes, his political survival, the survival of his coalition, what is called Greater Israel, which means that Israel controls all of the territory of mandatory Palestine, that is the British era Palestine, meaning from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean, both what is the legal boundaries of Israel plus East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza. So that's what Netanyahu wants. And he's wanted that since he first became prime minister in 1996. And nothing has changed, and there's no common ground on that. And he will never change his position on that. He will rise or fall from power. That's a different matter. But he will not change his position on that. That is his political core and his life's work. And it's a disaster, in my view. The man is absolutely under an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity and war crimes to perpetrate his political vision, which is Greater Israel. The United States has had a choice for decades whether to go along with this and fight Israel's wars or whether to say there needs to be peace and a two-state solution. Up until today, the U.S. has always sided with Israel. This is the so-called Israel lobby power. It's dominating in Washington. The question is whether Trump is a part of that or not. If you had to bet, you would say yes. If you would think it through from the point of view of the United States interests and Trump's interests, you would say no. Biden lost power, probably the whole administration lost re-election in large part because of its weakness of foreign policy and in large part by handing over Middle East policy to the Israel lobby. This cost the Democrats dearly in the swing states and in the general attitude that the U.S. government was not in control. Trump has a choice as a president. The job of a president is to lead, but there has been no leadership, basically almost going back to Truman, about Israel because the political lobby of Israel has been so powerful all along. So this is exactly what's at stake this week. I'm waiting to see rather than predicting, because if you were to predict, you would predict that the Israel lobby would continue. And if you would hope for peace, you would say that Trump would lay down the law and tell Netanyahu, I don't care what's happening to you. I care that this war is not starting again, and that's it, and send him packing. That's what a president would do. We haven't had one like that for many, many, many presidents. So this is what's at stake this week.
It is one other big thing that's happening as well, which is the under Trump, suspending what's referred to as foreign aid for 90 days, which hits institutions such as USAID, but also these other NGOs, which have often been criticized for being, they're called non-governmental organizations, but they're financed by the US government. They're often staffed by people close aligned with the intelligence community. Sometimes it is the intelligence community, and often the way they interpret human rights tends to always align with geopolitical interest. Now, by defunding this, there's already been huge consequences. We hear from Ukraine, for example, all this media, often 80 to 90% are financed by these US so-called NGOs, and even from Hungary, the opposition media, which tries to undermine Orban, has also lost a lot of its financing. So it seems quite, yeah, it's a huge development, and I guess I'm wondering where the motivation is. Is this an effort because he wants to remake a lot of America's foreign policies? Is this a way of uprooting the deep state? Is it simply pragmatic cost cutting measures, or is it geopolitical? Because only the last month these NGOs have had. The former prime minister, now the current prime minister of Georgia, warned that the United States was trying to topple the government there with NGOs to make them into a second front line. In Slovakia, they're arguing that this attempt to be NGOs are trying to topple him because he's too favorable of ending the war in Ukraine, same as Orban. So is this geopolitical interest of Trump? Is he cutting costs? Is it uprooting deep state? How are you reading this whole thing? Because it's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it's a very good set of questions. Again, I'm sorry to say, it's probably a number of motives that are different by different actors. But let me summarize it this way. First of all, USAID is a mix of three very different missions. One is true and urgent humanitarian aid to help finance safe water or anti-malaria medicines and so forth that keep people alive urgently. USAID really does that. You stop that, people die. And so that's the good side of USAID. Second, USAID is an instrument of foreign policy, obviously of the United States, not only of development or humanitarian policy. You help those who vote with the U.S., side with the U.S., allow the U.S. to establish military bases, fight alongside the U.S., and so forth. So it is a completely politicized institution that is hopelessly misused for sometimes nefarious foreign policy grounds. Third, it is a deep state institution, which is that it funds literally color revolutions, insurrections, and so forth. And it provides opposition media that springs up upon demand when a government is to be overthrown, for example. So it's all of those things. And it's not, this action that was taken did not delineate among them, at least in the first order. Afterwards, some of the life-saving operations were restored. I'm sure many not. What was the purpose of all of this? It's, again, a mix. Foreign aid, the good part, saving lives and so forth, this is by itself opposed by core Trump constituencies. Doing good for others, stop that. Believe me, cut foreign aid, that's waste. Why would we help them? This is a very common trope in American politics, which is if it's good for others, it's bad for us. And so, ironically, it's not like people said, well, we should save the good stuff. No. We should cut the good stuff because that's a waste of money. If they want to stay alive, that's their business. That's not our business, is an American trope. But it's also true that probably this was an attack on the deep state in a way I would applaud because USAID got hopelessly, terribly misused for decades. I'm a development economist. I championed development help for poor people, but I would stop dealing with USAID because it was a completely political instrument and often a totally inappropriate instrument. And so I think that this was also part of the motivation, to be sure. In general, by the way, in the West, even in Norway, which is one of the big donors, even throughout Western Europe, the idea of helping people honestly to meet their basic needs is going out of fashion. It's incredible, the levels of selfishness, self-regard, and so forth against the most vulnerable people in the world. So USAID will not be saved because of a groundswell of support that we should help vulnerable people. It will be saved, if it is, by deep state forces that say we need this as a foreign policy tool for all the wrong reasons, in my view. But what it does do is what you said. It's amazing to watch how many front organizations have been exposed within a week. Suddenly, you can't propagandize. Suddenly, half the media in Ukraine is down because it was all US funded. It was USAID funded. This is the game of the US security state. This is the game of color revolutions. And at least temporarily, it was stopped. So we have a very good experiment underway that exposes what was going on.
Yeah, I agree. And I just, saw Bill Kristol. He tweeted out yesterday, I'd rather stand with the deep state than the Trump state. So it's remarkable that they can say this out loud.
Exactly. And Bill Kristol is one of the people that has brought us more wars, more disaster, closer to the brink of nuclear war. He's part of that neocon group from the start that has done so much profound damage. For him to say that at least clarifies, we hope that the Trump state will actually be on the other side of that. We're waiting to see. But if it is, that would be exactly the breakthrough to reality and to security that we need in the United States and that the world needs.
Just one final brief question. I was curious how you see China, to be honest, because in 2017, when Trump took the presidency, he was very eager on economic coercion against China. But since those days, it appears that China has shown it's able to diversify away from the US in terms of chip making, while the US obviously will struggle much more to diversify away from China, especially when it comes to rare earth metals and a lot of the resources which the US supply chains are dependent on. Are you picking up on any more moderate sentiment or approach by Trump this time, or is it hard to see through the noise, I guess?
Again, what the Trump group will decide is one matter, but the most important single thing that happened, not by Trump, but in the last weeks in geopolitics, was DeepSeek, was the Chinese demonstration that that's all fine and good, all your bluster and bandy and your hundreds of billions of dollars on expensive chips, but we can replicate what you're doing. And there are cheaper ways to do all of this. And don't worry, we're here. That was the real message of DeepSeek. And the truth is, this is a long story. The idea that the US dominates because it has a chokehold on some key technology has been a trope for at least, let's say, since 1945. The idea in 1945 was that the US had the atomic monopoly. When Truman reflected how long that monopoly would last, he said forever. Of course, it lasted for about 3.5 years. And in 1949, the Soviet Union joined the atomic club, and it followed similarly with the thermonuclear bomb in 1953-54. The point is, all of these ideas that, well, we're ahead and we will stay ahead technologically is just a long-standing, oft-repeated, naive trope. Star Wars was the same thing, and it goes on and on and on. AI is just the latest of this hype. China is a global superpower. It will be so. Trump has no credible threats against it. It doesn't mean that the U.S. won't be utterly stupid, but the U.S. cannot defeat, contain China, but the U.S. could get along with China peacefully just fine if Marco Rubio's observation is wisely heeded, that we are truly in a multipolar world. Because the implication of that is you don't go to war with the other party because they can't defeat you, you can't defeat them, but the only thing that both sides could do is blow up the whole world. And so you stay clear of each other. And again, I want to come back to the most basic idea. Well, it's the golden rule. It's several thousand years old in global thought, in every single ethical tradition, major tradition in the world. You do to others what you would have them do to you. And Trump does not want Russia and China on our borders or in our nearby waters. Maybe if the United States reflects on that vis-a-vis the East China Sea, the South China Sea, Taiwan, and so forth, we'll have a safer world. It's possible we're going to get there. These are the first days, lots and lots of noise, lots of confusion. Washington is in a tizzy. Trump is not alone in Washington. Things are upended. My underlying point is we could have a safer world, and the United States' hand is not very strong. So there's lots of noise and bluster and threat and boasting and puffing and huffing. But the fact of the matter is the U.S. can stop wars, but it can't win them, and it shouldn't fight them.
Well, hopefully we'll get back to the notion that security derives from mitigating the security competition, not defeating your adversaries. But
that's it. That's exactly it.
But anyways, Professor Sachs, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights. Very much
Great to be with you, and we'll stay in touch on watching these developments.
Will do.
Great. Thanks a lot.